mean, a quick Surya Namaskar for everyone. Yeah. But that's it. Neha, thank you so much. Neha is a very talented writer, so I urge everyone to go online and read some of her work. I think a lot of what writers have to say is in their work, so you guys all must read it. That said, I'm convinced that I'm now going to book a holiday to Meerut, but I sent a message to my boyfriend saying, darling, we're not going to Goa, we're going to Meerut. And he didn't seem so happy about this idea, but you know, we'll work on this, you know, but I think that said, I did travel to about 13 cities over the course of three years for India in Love. And you know, once we get a little bit out of Delhi and out of the cities, India is actually a really fascinating place, and it's something that I think all of us should experience. So I say all of you young people, pick up your backpacks, hop on a train, and go check out what's out there. So before I came here, I said I'm gonna, you know, I speak a lot at colleges and things, and I have sort of a set couple of topics. What do you call them, motivational or inspirational speeches? But when I came here, I said, "Ye to nahi chalega yahan pe. You guys seem too smart for all of that. So this is just going to have to be off the cuff." I also want to keep it quite short because I would rather that all of you guys ask me questions and we interact a little bit more. But you know, one thing I'm just going to say. Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Okay. It was actually a tweet that I did this morning. I'm turning 30 in 2 days. And I think the day that you turn 30, you look back at your 20s and sort of say, you know, what was this decade about? So I thought maybe what I would talk about today is sort of some of the influences that shaped me over the last decade. And actually, yeah, I'm just going to say one thing quickly before this creates problems. 1 second. Let me just switch this thing off then. Okay, there we go. But I said, let me just talk a little bit about some of the things that I think I have learned over the past decade. They told me this is quite a young audience. What's the average age here, like 25, 26? Yeah? Okay, so I feel like a real adult in this room.
Okay, do we just fix the...
So the one thing that I saw this morning was, and I kind of pondered on this for a couple of minutes, was the 3 C's of life: choices, chances, and changes. You must make a choice to take a chance or your life will never change. The first choice that I took was when I was 19. So I think now 11 years ago, when I was in a beauty pageant, in the Miss India pageant of all things. It was a very random choice. I didn't have any experience. I was actually a college student studying economics, all set for a career in investment banking. And then I took that choice to do this. I didn't win a crown. You know, there was no sort of acting involved or modeling contracts involved. But what I did do is I wrote my first book, What Would You Do to Save the World, which was sort of a behind-the-scenes satirical version of what happens at a beauty pageant, so that the Times of India wouldn't sue me. We changed the name of the beauty pageant. We changed a lot of the names, but I think I still got a lot of flack for that book, and I remember being quite young, and when the book came out, you know, I was sort of attacked left, right, and center by so many people saying that, oh my gosh, this is the stupidest book we've ever read. And I said, my gosh, in my whole life, I've been called a lot of things. I've been called ugly, I've been called fat, I've been called, you know, unkind, whatever. But no one's ever really called me stupid. So I think that was sort of a big, you know, that was sort of a reality check for me. And I said, listen, let me make the next 10 years about proving this wrong. I mean, it did take around that long, to be honest. I wrote a second book, The Great Indian Love Story, again inspired by a true story. Again, written when I was around 2021. I was still in college when I sort of first came up with the concept of that book, inspired by a young woman who I met in Delhi. And it's sort of about this strange nouveau riche culture which Delhi was developing in the high life, and this sort of girl who comes in from Punjab and sees all this and sort of goes down the wrong track. The third book that I wrote was called What Would You Do to, There's No Love on Wall Street, which was again inspired by a stint that I did on Wall Street to pursue that investment banking dream of mine, which very quickly fell apart. After sort of 3 months at this bank, I said, my gosh, and I think I still can't go into an office. That's one of the reasons I'm a writer, because offices after that 3-month experience scare me. So I think that's sort of, those were my 3 books, my 3 novels, all sort of written in my early 20s. But they take time to come out. Books sort of come out every 2 years, and along the way, I decided I was working for a little while. I went to business school. I sometimes forget that completely, but yes, I did go to Columbia Business School right out of college. I don't use that degree very much, but I'm sure in my future it will, it'll be valuable. At least I hope so. And I worked for a little while, but then at the end of the day, it just seemed like the most impact that I was creating was through my writing. And I would occasionally get letters from readers and emails from readers, and I'd say, hey, listen, even if 200, 300, 400 people read my books, at least this way I'm creating some sort of impact. And it seemed to me like this was a better life maybe a poorer life, but still a better life than working at a bank, or in between I was working for a private jet company, which was very cool, but after a while I said, listen, selling jets to rich people, how is this going to change the world in any way? And I said, listen, but in your 20s also you have this sort of, sometimes some of us have these ideals that, hey, we're invincible, we can really change the world, we can do anything that we want to do, and we can be anything that we want to be. But I think sort of when you hit 30, you sort of realize, maybe you're not, we realize that we're mortal after all, and that there are certain goals that we will have to work towards, and we can create an impact. It's not going to be this sort of, it's not going to be taking over the world, which is what we think in our 20s, but it will be something. So coming back, so now for the past 4 years, I spent the best part of my life writing India in Love, which is on marriage and sexuality in the 21st century. As I mentioned earlier, I traveled to around 15 cities, interviewed around 600 people, and sort of put together a thesis that India is going through very, very big changes at the moment. So our generation is very different than, say, our parents' generation when it comes to sexual mores, when it comes to marriage, when it comes to the way that some of the choices that we're making. I started out with just an idea, saying that something is going on. I'm not sure what it is, but I do see lots of changes. And then I actually spent around 6 months researching, just seeing, is there something here? Do I have 1 book or 5 books or 10 books? What's going on? And what I realized is that there was a book here, and there was an important book here, and that the magnitude of this cultural revolution that India was going through was something very important. We heard a little bit about urban India and rural India from Neha's talk, and along that vein, I decided in my book to focus just on the urban middle class. So by 2020, India is going to be the youngest nation in the world. By 2039, it's estimated that 90% of India's population will be middle class, and India would have added 700 million people to the middle class. So I said, I want to write a book which is forward-looking. So we're going to address the sort of the new India and what India of the future will look like. And that's what I decided to do in India in Love. And I did lots of things for this book. I spent a lot of time with marriage brokers. I, in fact, got 4 of my own friends married. I became like a bona fide marriage broker myself. So if any of you guys, you know who to come to. I did sort of sting operations, interviewed sex workers, interviewed pimps. My gosh, I went into brothels. I went and bought sex toys. I went and bought condoms. I went to condom manufacturers, lingerie makers. I went to abortion clinics. I went to gynecologists. I went to sexologists. All sorts of things to understand what is going on in our country. And my conclusion was that India is going through a bona fide sexual revolution. We're at the beginning of it. and arranged marriage is breaking down. And even the concept of arranged marriage that we have today is going through a very different change. And looking at my own family, my grandparents met only on the day of their wedding. And I'm sure, did any of your guys' grandparents have love marriages? Whoa, your grandparents had love marriages? That's quite cool.
They met on the bus.
They met on a bus? Fantastic. Actually, my grandparents, they saw each other at Banaras Hindu University from far away, decided, I love this person, I want to get married. I kind of think to myself, my God, if only it was this simple these days, We saw someone and say, hey, this is it. But unfortunately, things have gotten a little complicated. And then in my parents, they met like twice before they got married. And then in my generation, let's not even talk about, how many boys me and my sisters all went through and are going through, and the sort of ordeals and dilemmas and trilemmas that we're constantly going through when it comes to love, sex, and marriage. But yet, while India is going through changes, there is sort of a lot of, there's still a lot of flux, right? We are a society in change, and there's nothing clear cut. So while we may have a bracket society which is very open, we have another which is there's a pushback, there's kaf panchayats, there's honor killings, there's couples running away, and a group that I spent a lot of time with was the Love Commandos. It's an organization, and they've dedicated their lives to saving couples in love. Runaway couples from across the country come to these guys and they get them secretly married off. In fact, just 2 days ago, I went to a very interesting wedding. In fact, I funded that wedding. I donated. I said, 2,000 rupees. This is probably good karma. Probably help me get married. Let's fund this wedding and see what happens. It was a young Muslim boy who was converting to Hinduism to marry a Hindu girl, and these weren't sort of, he was a driver. His mother was a maid in someone's household. They were from Muzaffarnagar, which the place that Neha just spoke about. The girl was 18 or 19. She just finished her 12th grade, and they'd fallen in love and they said, we want to get married. And so they'd run away to the Love Commandos. They were getting them married. The boy was converting, and they were getting married. So I went to that wedding, and now I think they're just unfortunately spending their honeymoon in the Love Commandos shelter. But we're hoping for a better future for them. So India is seeing a lot of change, but there's also at the same time, this has created a lot of friction. And I have a chapter on sexual violence in India and love, which talks about, it talks a little bit about why as sexuality comes to the forefront in India, there's also a lot of conflict. We have sexual violence has come into the fore, repression, harassment. So the good thing is that people are reporting it more so than ever before, but there's also more sexual violence happening than before. So I sort of look to a very changing India where there's sexual titillation all around us, from Sunny Leone, whose story I can't get my head around that Sunny Leone story. How a porn star in the US comes to India and becomes like a proper Bollywood star. But that's sort of the irony and also the beauty of our country, maybe. So I do think that India is going through these massive changes. I speak a lot about this topic here, internationally, and I think people are sort of realizing that and seeing that cultural changes are in fact as important, if not more important, than political and economic change. Because everywhere around the world, people talk about political change and economic change, and I sort of make the point that how can we call a country a developed country, or how can Prime Minister Modi think of bringing India as a civilized, developed nation when women in this country are not safe going out on the streets, where there's still very, very poor figures of maternal health and women's education and literacy and things like that. So I do think that sometimes cultural changes are important to notice, though as a nation we are obsessed with politics. And we're also obsessed with weddings. And on that note, just to sort of lighten up the mood of this venue, I'm going to do a short reading from India and Love. So the book is divided into 10 chapters. And while there are a lot of dark chapters talking about dark things, I also have quite an interesting chapter on weddings. And because it's wedding season right now, and if you guys aren't attending weddings and surely you're stuck in the traffic of weddings, I'm going to do a quick reading from a chapter called The Big Fat Indian Wedding. So I remember there was one day around 3 years ago in which there was 15,000 weddings in one night in Delhi. And in that one night, I think I went to 15 weddings. I said, let me just do like a quick, let me go from wedding to wedding, try to just encapsulate all of this stuff happening in my mind. So this is from that period where all I did for about 1 month was attend all sorts of different weddings to write this chapter. It's a short reading, so I'm not going to bore you guys too much. On the eve of Gandhi Jayanti, a wedding that is a vulgar display of ostentation and wealth, to a degree I would not have thought possible, even in a city renowned for its vulgar displays of wealth, is taking place on the outskirts of Delhi. The MC announces that today is an ideal day to get married, since the following day, October 2nd, is the birthday of the father of our nation. He isn't being in the least bit sarcastic or ironic. Or maybe he sincerely believes that because the visage of the Mahatma adorns Indian currency notes, including the 1,000 rupee ones, he would have approved of the lakhs of rupees that are being spent on this wedding. In reality, Gandhiji had stated clearly and unequivocally that wedding ceremonies should be austere and focus on sacred rituals and simplicity. The Sangeet is taking place in the upmarket Chhatarpur Farms. The theme is Avatar, based on the Hollywood blockbuster. A 50-foot replica of the Tree of Souls stands in the center of the ground, the size of a football field. It is impressive, and I'm certain that even James Cameron would have found this commendable. Waiters are dressed as members of the Navi tribe, and state-of-the-art laser lighting and fog machines create an impression of being in an alternate universe. Cirque du Soleil dancers perform to popular Bollywood tunes before internationally acclaimed DJ Edward Maya takes over for the night. Like the over-applied rouge and glittering ornaments on the women, everything here appears tawdry, bordering on the burlesque. Undulating patterns of strobe lights and shadows blend spectrally to form random forms. Against the storm of light and sound, young women and men from Delhi swish set, make small talk at the bar, decked out in jewels, dressed in slinky saris and sparkly lehengas. At one of the 4 bars, I watch a spectacular extravaganza. Navi tribe members ride human beings dressed as dragons and zip to and fro. Next, the 2,000 guests, parents, grandparents, and children, watch a glittering Bollywood-esque dance performance that is staged by the bride's and groom's friends and family. As I watch, the sister of the bride gyrates with the liquid grace of a professional, while a slew of male cousins prance around her. She is dancing to the sound of the season, the song of the season, Chikni Chameli, which translates to Sexy Chameli, and alludes to a female prostitute named Chameli in another film. The lyrics go something like this. Come, my evenings are lonely. I will share them with you. With the fire of my body, I have come to light up cigarettes and joints. Sexy Chameli has come. Despite the somewhat risque lyrics, the song is so popular that even small children shimmy to it and mouth its lyrics. The show is impressive, and it is apparent that the families and friends have spent weeks, perhaps even months, practicing their moves. So now I sort of talk a little bit about how this all happened. Like, this was never how weddings were ever done in India. They were always sort of very simple, but then there was this whole sort of storm of Dil To Pagal Hai and Kuch Kuch Hota Hai and sort of big Bollywood weddings, and everything was inspired by all of this. Now sort of jumping to a little bit of a section. Rohit, my companion for the evening, is most definitely drunk. The cadence of his voice, the slur in his speech, his overly elaborate gestures are definite proof. We engage in some drunken chatter, and though I'm a teetotaler, I've consumed quite a few Red Bulls, and I'm feeling quite drunk. Rohit has returned from a 4-day-long youngsters party in Ibiza. He tells me about this latest trend. My friends don't even know most of the people attending their weddings. Even if they want a small private affair, their parents won't allow it. It is against all social norms. You can't really have drunk or have fun with all your aunties and uncles around. So nowadays, everyone has a youngsters party, attended only by young people, even though they're all about 40 years old. Rohit now turns philosophical. Most big weddings are shit shows. There are thousands of people. To be honest, it's vulgar. It's sad. People want to remember their weddings by how opulent they are, and by going above and beyond the last big wedding. But isn't timelessness supposed to be created by emotions? It seems far removed from these functions what they're actually meant to be. A year later, you don't remember a thing. You just think about the next big party. Luckily for Rohit, the next party is the next day, at the mammoth wedding of a real estate baron's only daughter. At the entrance to the venue, I'm greeted by two life-size garlanded elephant sculptures. They're juxtaposed unexpectedly against eerie blue-eyed mime with his face spray-painted silver. 30 such mime artists have been flown in from France. The venue is so large that a fleet of golf carts is standing by to ferry people to the stage, where the bride and groom stand to meet their guests. When I finally enter this actual venue, closer to an arena than a hall, I reel from sensory overload. At one end, a women's choir sings devotional bhajans. In another corner, a group of saffron-clad young priests chant mantras. On the balcony, a small army of musicians play traditional Carnatic music. There's also a 50-foot-high wall with 4 rows of squares. Inside each square sits a musician playing an instrument. It is essentially a band on the wall. Next to these musicians is a bar where a bunch of kids have congregated. A few suited ruffians throw cocktail olives at a man sitting in one of the squares. The newlyweds stand on a massive stage with octopus-like tentacles reaching up to the ceiling. Hundreds of visitors queue up to wish the couple. There's a row of television screens on each side of the hall in the style of sporting events, so that people far away from the stage can witness the activities. The sights and sounds are so overwhelming that all I can do is stare. I make my way to the front of this massive hall, and to pause and rest in between, partly because the hall is so large and partly because the sari that I've carelessly tied on is threatening to fall off. The wedding that I'm attending is typical of a big fat Indian wedding. It is no different from dozens of similar weddings that are taking place across the country. Only the scale differs. I remember my own sister's recent wedding reception, where a wedding set had been constructed on a large barren ground, complete with a giant wobbly stage, on which my sister and her husband stood for 3 hours while guests came and greeted them. The wedding had different food stations, a Punjabi roadside dhaba with a thatched roof, a cowboy bar with waiters wearing cowboy boots and hats, and a seafood station with a pile of sand as a makeshift beach. Our wedding planner made sure that we had an elaborate spread of food. I remember her words clearly. The bride's family had to put up a show, and anyone you have interacted with in your lifetime has to be fed. An Indian wedding is like a mass charity event. Except none of the guests that I saw during the course of that long evening struck me as being the least bit malnourished. The situation is similar at this big fat Delhi wedding too. I walked with sprawling banquets featuring a variety of different cuisines. French, Japanese, Thai, Mughalai, a seafood counter featuring lobster and Cambodian basa, and a cheese counter with 50 varieties of cheese. The dessert counter has a chocolate fountain with 20 different kinds of comestibles. At the fruit counter, people are hoarding fruit, pushing and shoving and piling their plates high with peaches, strawberries, rambutans, mangosteens, and other varieties of imported fruit. A richly capricious lady plows through the crowd like a puddle battleship with her infant daughter in tow. A plump child with salon curls and a frothy outfit. The infant daughter has 3 maids with her. One holds her bag, another her milk bottle, and another the child herself. I look at the northeastern maid carrying the small child, and I wonder what she makes of all of this. Her 6,000 rupee a month salary is probably the cost per head at this wedding. She probably has a young child at home and ailing parents back in her village. And then she sees all of this. Enough to drive anyone wild, or at least crazy enough to hoard some food for herself. At the Haagen-Dazs counter, I encounter a saffron-robed priest carrying a small tattered briefcase, eating a chocolate fudge bar. I ask him what time the wedding is. He replies with a breezy insouciance that the auspicious time for the wedding, as per the birth charts of the to-be-wedded couple, passed 2 hours ago. It doesn't matter now when the wedding rituals are performed. As rich and lavish as it is inside, just steps away from the entrance, the smell of open sewage pervades the air, along with the toxic fumes of a rotting corpse. There's a mini traffic jam, and cars struggle to get out. Someone next to me says, "Kutta mar gaya," a dog has died. Roadkill lies in front of us, its skull flattened, further squished in ground by the wheels of a car. A row of luxury cars has been parked in front of the entrance, including a Rolls Royce, a Bentley, and a Jaguar, blocking the way of the other guests. I see my friend Rohit walking fast towards an idling vehicle. I rush towards him. Maybe he can give me a lift to my car. But there are people, cars, hounds, and horses between us. Rohit is sweating profusely. It is a hot night, and he's wearing heavy, formal clothes. I catch his attention and wave to him. He looks at me, befuddled by alcohol, sweat, and the general confusion. And then comprehension slowly dawns. "Hello, darling. How are you?" he says. He gets into his car, and he asks me again, "How are you?" Before I can answer, he quips, "Good night, sweetie," and swiftly drives away. Firecrackers erupt in the sky at midnight, industrial-sized crackers that spell the long names of the brides and the grooms. After a few minutes, all that is left behind is a thick cloud of noxious fumes that obscure the moons and the star. Although the wedding is still going on inside, the venue is now being dismantled by a small army of workers. The facade of the entrance has been decorated entirely with red roses. Perhaps 1 million roses have been used tonight. One worker is very carefully hand-picking roses with stalks out of a small mountain. I strike up a conversation with him. His daughter is getting married tomorrow. Fresh flowers are expensive, especially at this time of the year, and roses in particular are rare commodities. He's collecting the remains of the flowers from this wedding to use at his own daughter's wedding. He tells me that he has been saving for his daughter's wedding for 10 years. As dowry, he has given his prospective son-in-law's family a two-wheeler, a fridge, and a gold chain. His daughter and son-in-law want to go to a honeymoon to Mumbai, and he will be paying for that too. He's worried about the expenses. Even after all these years of savings, it is still not enough, so he's trying to salvage things from his astronomical waste. I also see an ambulance on site. One of the musicians sitting up in the square boxes has fallen down and broken a leg. Perhaps this was a man who was being pelted with olives. He tells me that he has been taken to the back and put in a room so that he wouldn't disrupt the wedding. It is only now that he's being treated. I ask him if I can help him in any way. He just shrugs and says that he is fine. He's only broken one leg and fractured a few ribs. It could have been much worse. He doesn't seem to be angry at his fall or for being locked up in the back room for an hour. I'm astonished by the equanimity with which the man seems to be taking his misfortune. We Indians believe in karma. What I've seen this evening would be enough to set off a whole series of uprisings. The maid whose own child lies awake at home while she mollycoddles a child dressed like a souffle. The worker who picks dusty roses off the ground that night before his own daughter's wedding. The musician who's locked away in a dark room because he fails to entertain at the hedonistic wedding. Do they all believe that they deserve the lives that they have? That it is their karma? That maybe their next lives, or the one after that, will be better if they suffer in silence in this one, or the host feeding them something that makes them play along? That's just a short little excerpt on, thank you.